lack of imagination, lack of ideas, and ultimately that's what's costing them. They're so good out of possession, arguably the best in Europe without the ball, but with the ball...
There's enough within that squad that has scored goals before, so why do they find it so difficult now?
I think they've become a little bit formulaic, to be honest, and maybe they're overthinking and not doing enough on the fly.
Declan Rice was brilliant, actually, but what did he celebrate more, the goal or the tackle?
I still think he can do more of that, Declan Rice. I think he's got the attributes to be more of a goal-scoring midfielder than he is. As poor as Arsenal were, it's potentially the best 45 minutes they've played under Ruben Amorim.
This is where Amorim makes his money, right? He, as a developer of talent, there's no point discarding them. I think there is definitely something there.
There is work to do, but I think work to do is better than the wrong attitude.
My worry now is that the trajectory of United seems to be one good performance is followed by a bad.
It's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface. talkSPORT's chief football correspondent Alex Crook is here, and so is Kevin Hatchard, the European football expert. What thrilled you this weekend, Kevin?
I think there was an extraordinary thing in Germany where the top two both lost, so we had no change to the title race there. That very rarely happens. So we got some weird results there. But obviously Liverpool taking another step towards the Premier League title thrilled me as well. Even me, the most cautious Liverpool fan going, prepared to accept that they've probably won the league. But not 100% yet.
Yes, such is the situation in the Premier League title race that I think Liverpool lead it by 97 points now. That I think all the Liverpool fans can start getting a little excited that they can lift the trophy, especially after Arsenal. Drop points again away at Manchester United. What did you cheer the most, Crook, this weekend?
I think the impact that Aidan Heaven had off the bench for Manchester United, I thought he looked absolutely colossal in that second half, and they seem to have unearthed a real gem. So yeah, that got me excited. I thought the second half performance for United, actually, as poor as Arsenal were, was potentially the best 45 minutes they've played under Ruben Amorim.
Okay, he's found heaven, sweet heaven, baby, on the wings of love. Take that, Arsenal fans. And the thing that thrilled me the most was Nottingham Forest's performance, second half, against Manchester City. I think Ederson's probably disappointed with the way he allowed that goal to sneak through his gloves and into the near post, but I thought that they deserved their victory. I thought they played really well, excellent execution of a game plan, and exposed Manchester City's sort of frailty, really, not in terms of necessarily defensively, but just sort of like that lack of iron will that seems to have slipped away from them over the course of the last 6 months or so. How's Dancing on Ice? It's finished now, Crook. This is why you're so hungover and you can hardly speak and you keep looking at your phone because your wife is supposed to be bringing you some Alka-Seltzer. Where are we on the mood scale?
Upbeat at the moment, but that might wear off in a couple of hours. Not just Dancing on Ice. We had the darts, didn't we, on Thursday night? We got Cheltenham on Wednesday, so I might need a holiday during that international break. It's come at a good time.
You also forget that you went to a 40th birthday party on Saturday night and a brew.
That as well. Yeah.
Wow.
Well.
He'll be off to Portugal and he'll never come back. I assume it is Portugal again, is it, Crookie?
It's got to be done.
I thought so. Needs to be hunted by the tourist board.
He's absolutely on the floor, and so are Arsenal's title hopes. Let's get into the game at Old Trafford. Manchester United won, Arsenal won. 200th league game in charge for Mikel Arteta, but he was very frustrated at the end, Kevin. He walked off in the middle of an interview. In fact, he tried to walk out of Patrick Davidson's interview twice. They didn't test the goalkeeper enough throughout the course of the game. What do you think frustrated him most? Because it can't be the fact that he's sort of finally realised the title race is over, because that was long gone.
Yeah, I think it's that lack of imagination in the final third, and I think you have to stack it up with what happened in Eindhoven, because we've talked a lot about them having injured players in attack, and they've got that lack of depth in attack. But they were brilliant against PSV. I know it's different opposition, but that spark that they found there was completely absent here. And in that second half, as Crookie says, Manchester United were much, much better. It was only David Raya making some stupendous saves that actually stopped it being a defeat, quite frankly. And I think that is the frustration, that they're so good out of possession, arguably the best in Europe without the ball, but with the ball, just time and time again, they aren't finding those dominant spells. I thought if you look at the game at Nottingham Forest, and I know we'll talk about them a bit more later, but if you look at that performance, that was similar. Lack of imagination, lack of ideas, and ultimately that's what's costing them.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because they've got so many technically gifted players and players who have scored goals in the past. It almost is as if they've got some sort of brain freeze. Crook, you mentioned that they were awful. I actually didn't think they were awful. I thought they were pretty poor in one department, which was that front area of the pitch. Their approach play, the way they knock the ball around, the way they build in possession is excellent. But that killer instinct, that bit at the top of the end of the pitch, that's really missing. I don't think it can be down to one player. Yes, there's been a lot of injuries, a lot of disruption. We know all that. But even so, there's enough within that squad that has scored goals before. So why do they find it so difficult now?
I think they've become a little bit formulaic, to be honest, and maybe they're overthinking and not doing enough on the fly. We know that Mikel Arteta doesn't particularly like maverick players. Maybe they're missing one or two maverick players who can do the unexpected, because they were easy to play against, I thought, for Manchester United. I think defensively, United's setup was spot on, as I mentioned already, particularly when Heaven came on in the second half. But it wasn't difficult to defend against that Arsenal team. And I feel a little bit, actually, for Raheem Sterling. He's gone there to try and revive his career. Obviously, a player that Mikel Arteta knows well from Manchester City. But he clearly has no faith in him, and he's not given Raheem Sterling the opportunity to build up a head of steam and get regular minutes in the first team. When you're a team struggling for goals and you've got a player of that calibre, I think you need to use him.
I don't think that's fair. I think that he has given him opportunities, Kev, and he hasn't taken them. I mean, I was at the Leicester game. He started that match. He declined to take shots from the edge of the penalty area, from inside the box, and gave the ball to Nwaneri to shift the responsibility on. They had to bring Marino on in that game to get the winning goals. I saw him against Girona. He did step up, put his hand up to take a penalty in that game. He played the whole of the 90 minutes in that match, and he missed the penalty and had very few chances. So I think it's a Raheem Sterling problem, that, rather than an Arteta one.
I think he's got the yips, as they might call them in golf, when you can't sink a putt from any kind of distance and just nothing's going right. He just looks like a player that's completely lost his rhythm, lost his confidence. It's kind of heartbreaking to see. I've always been a huge fan of his. I think he's a terrifically intelligent player. I think at City he proved time and time again that he could perform at the highest level, because you don't stay in a team like City for that long under Pep Guardiola, who is, monstrously detailed and ruthless. You don't stay there for that long without that elite quality. But it just seems to have completely deserted him. And that's the most fascinating thing about not just football, but sport in general. It's that psychology. And once that confidence goes, it's really, really tough to get it back.
Okay, Ruben Amorim afterwards says Manchester United don't really want to play like that, Crook. They don't want to be a containment team. But why do they turn up in big games?
It comes down to mentality, doesn't it? That's been a problem not just under Ruben Amorim, but under Erik ten Hag. Exhibit A, the FA Cup final, when they were absolutely sensational against Manchester City. So I do think that's a cultural issue that they need to change. And my worry now is that the trajectory of United seems to be one good performance is followed by a bad. And obviously they've got a massive game live on talkSPORT on Thursday against Real Sociedad. If they play like they did in the second half against Arsenal, they'll win. But you can't guarantee that they're going to produce that kind of performance. They've got big players coming back. I think Ugarte will be fit for that game. Intrigued to see what he does with Rasmus Højlund, because I thought Xerxes, barring the over-elaborate finish when he should have just wrapped his foot through it and won the game, I thought he played well. Højlund comes on. A lot of people are waxing lyrical about the Declan Rice tackle. I know our own Adrian Durham didn't like the way he celebrated that. Should have got a chance to make a tackle. If you're a centre-forward, just score. What are you doing delaying the strike from there? 20 games now, Rasmus Højlund without a goal.
Rooney's analysis of him on Match of the Day 2 last night was really interesting, actually. He was talking about his movement being really good and how he sort of uses his body in circumstances to win space inside the area, but he needs to simplify the finish. And also the idea of sort of like towards the end of the game, the Bruno Fernandes chance from which you think Manchester United are going to win it before David Raya makes a brilliant double save. if you watch Højlund, he's the one who wins the ball, takes it down the touchline, uses his body brilliantly, lays off a pass down the right-hand side. And instead of then turning and getting into the box and arriving at the 6-yard box as the pass then comes back in, he's still standing outside the penalty area watching the play develop. And it falls to Bruno. Bruno's a little bit further over. That allows the time for Raya to readjust himself and get into position to make the save. If it had been Højlund who was arriving at the near post, there would be no chance, and it would be 2-1 and 3 points for Manchester United. There is work to do, but I think work to do is better than the wrong attitude. And I think Manchester United at times, you look at them and you think, well, they've had the wrong attitude, they haven't applied themselves in the right way. But you'd rather have players in the team and in and around the team that actually you feel as if you can push on to the next level. The Xerxes finish, I know you said it was a bit over-elaborate, but is there an argument to sort of say, actually, he really couldn't do anything else? He was travelling in that direction. It came through his leg. To swivel, he's a Crook, he's a big lad. You lot don't move very quickly, do you? It's a bit difficult. It was more of an easier thing for him to do, I think. I think he's okay. I know he gets a lot of stick, but I think he's all right.
He is. You look at what he did for Bologna last season, and I know people will say, it's only Bologna, but he helped them qualify for the Champions League, and he did it playing as a slightly withdrawn striker, not an out-and-out striker, which he's never been. If you look at his career, he's never been a volume goal scorer. But I think in that slightly more withdrawn role, that 10 that works in Amorim's system, I think he can work. I think there's raw material there. I think the same about Højlund. I think if you look at his time at Atalanta, yes, he didn't score tons of goals, but he scored all types of goals. And I still think with his movement, there's something there. So this is where Amorim makes his money, right? He as a developer of talent, we've seen him do it at Sporting time and time again.
Definitely.
And I think with a full pre-season, with time to work with them, there's no point discarding them. I think there is definitely something there. So I'll be really interested to see if they can kind of ride out the wave. And they've had a lot of stick. I mean, Xerxes especially. But if they can ride out that wave, I still think they can be effective Premier League players.
Yeah, Kev, also the other thing that's really getting to my goat, I can't work out whether it's Xerxes or Xerxes, because I have a video of him saying his name, which is Xerxes, but everyone seems to be sort of convinced it's Xerxes. Which one is it, Kev?
Well, generally a double E in Dutch is an A sound. So, and what we have, because also people call him Joshua a lot, but he says Joshua. So
I'm sort of going to go with him. He said Xerxes, so I feel like he probably knows his name.
Yeah,
right?
You'd think so. But there is a bit of a trend with players anglicising stuff to make it easier as well.
If he wants to do that, right? I mean, I know, but let's not go full Didier Zecora, who once had the word maestro on the back of his jersey.
Look, yeah, I think. I always thought generally a double E was an A sound, but if he says Xerxes, maybe that's what.
Anyway, okay, right, we'll go from there. What else to talk about with Arsenal and with Declan Rice tackle, obviously, and the Declan Rice goal. Declan Rice was brilliant actually, but what did he celebrate more, the goal or the tackle, Crook?
Yeah, Adrian didn't like that. The fact he was fist pumping after making that challenge, but listen, it was a great tackle, but he shouldn't have got the opportunity to make it. Højlund should just put the chance away. His goal was excellent, really well finished, well worked from Timber down that right-hand side as well. I still think he can do more of that, Declan Rice. I think he's got the attributes to be more of a goal-scoring midfielder than he is.
Yeah, I think he can add figures to it, and Danny Murphy said that, and I sort of made an argument that he's got quite a lot of assists this season already, and he has. But I think, maybe there is a little bit more there too. Should we save up all together, club together, and buy Anthony Taylor a measuring tape? What do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, over a yard further than it should be. It's quite a distance, and it did make a tangible difference, right? I mean, it gives Bruno. I mean, it's a brilliant free kick. It is a brilliant free kick, no doubt. But the wall is clearly too far back, and it allows him to whip it up and over and score. By the way, Bruno Fernandes, if they didn't have him, where would they be?
Relegated.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I've been critical of his attitude at times in the past, the moaning and all that stuff, but you cannot deny what an extraordinary footballer he is. Not only his will to win, his passion, but his technical quality, but the fact that he delivers loads of goals, loads of assists, set pieces, penalties, you name it. He is a phenomenal footballer. I think it helps him to be the big guy. I think he likes that. I think he wants to be the leading player.
Because do you remember when Ronaldo came into the team? He wasn't as effective.
Not at all. And he had that kind of inferiority complex. And we're seeing that with Portugal a little bit as well, actually. But him being the main man absolutely suits him. And you have to give him a huge amount of credit. But yeah, if the wall isn't that far back, maybe it doesn't go in. So it was quite a weird miscalculation.
It's odd, right? Because that's like, referees pride themselves on being able to do distances. So, that was a bit of a odd one. Also, the pitch does mark it out for you. Okay. So each of those sort of like shaded areas on the pitch are 6 yards. So you can sort of basically work it out with your eyes anyway.
Get him a trundle wheel. Do you remember the trundle wheel at school? I'm showing my age now. People don't remember that, but we used to have to go and measure.
I was going to say laser pen, but I think you can do it with a laser pen now, one of those golf sites, but you went back to the 60s, so fair enough. The good news is that Manchester United have now got 34 points, and 35.2 points is the average number required to keep you in the league over the last 28 seasons. So just a point to go, Krugster, which is also a big positive for Tottenham Hotspur, who dropped points at home again, 2-2 with Bournemouth. Let's be clear, Bournemouth were terrific for large parts of this game, pressing superbly, locking onto Spurs players all over the pitch. But does the comeback boost morale and show how good Spurs can be when they really need to be, or does it mask a multitude of sins, Crook?
Probably the latter, I'd have thought, but it will boost their confidence ahead of, again, a huge game. I'm there for talkSPORT 2 on Thursday night. I do expect them to turn it around against Arsene Alkmaar, but they were booed off, weren't they, at half-time, and the atmosphere could have turned very toxic, so credit to them for finding a way back into the game. I thought Bournemouth were excellent for the first half. What a pass by Milos Kerkez for the opening goal. But they showed a little bit of character and resilience. I still don't think Ange Postecoglou is very good, to be honest. And I think he tactically was a little bit shown up by Andoni Iraola, but they've managed to salvage a point. As I say, that'll give them a little kickstart for that game on Thursday night.
Well, obviously, Ange Postecoglou would be here to say, if he was defending himself, mate, I've won titles in Australia, I've won titles in Japan, I've won titles in Celtic. How can I not be very good? But just to sort of give Crook's sort of assertion a little bit more detail, if you go back to the first 20 seconds of that game, Romero not being pressed with any great intensity, but he was being pressed and he was shown onto his wrong side or his uncomfortable side or whatever. It was his first touch after 20 seconds. He had been out for a little while, gives the ball away, they almost score. He does it again straight away and almost gives it to Evan Nilsson, and then they almost score again. And if you looked at the game as a whole, they probably should have been 3 or 4 up at Bournemouth by the time that Tottenham got back into the game. There was a moment where, obviously, Bournemouth are very good at sort of making you play to a certain side, pressing you and squeezing you into a corner, forcing you into errors. They're great at that high intensity, high pressure. But Vicario decides halfway through the second half, forget this. I'm not doing this anymore. This is a nightmare. I'm going to start hitting it longer. Hits it long again. And I think Postecoglou is a little bit frustrated by that. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, why is he still insisting doing something which is clearly causing them a problem? I don't understand that, Kevin. And that lack of adaptability doesn't make sense in terms of how you progress forward. Because if you look at someone even as basic as Portsmouth in the Championship, right? They start the season having won League One, playing out from the back and lovely pretty patterns and being brilliant in League One. They get to the Championship, they realise, hold on a second, this lot are better than us. We can't do that anymore. We've got to change. So after 6 or 7 games, they change what they're doing. They have to be a little bit more pragmatic, and then they learn to get up to that level. Then they roll it back again, and then they revert a little bit to what they were doing, but they sort of mix between being a bit more pragmatic, but still playing a little bit of football. Surely that's just sensible management. Am I going mad here?
No, I mean, this is a debate that I think is a really interesting one, and it does resurface again and again, because if you've got an ideologue like Postecoglou, who's got a very set way of playing, that he's got principles, he doesn't want his players to deviate from that. That then is tricky if you're not getting the results. And he would say, we've had injuries, we've had players that have had to play again and again and again for months. But it does make them vulnerable in these situations, and you're asking your players to do a hell of a lot. So I think you don't want to junk the philosophy entirely, but variation is not necessarily a bad thing. And if you're getting into trouble, then sometimes you can go long. But it's a really tricky balance to strike, because if the manager is suddenly chopping and changing, the players start to think, well, if he doesn't believe in it, why should we?
It's not chopping and changing, right? It's not chopping and changing. Your philosophy can be to build the play with possession. But if you can't do that, if it's impossible for you to do that because of the pressure that somebody else is applying on you, then you've got to come up with another way of doing it. Because what we have to remember is, right, I've mentioned this before, been studying, reading a book about how you analyse football matches. And the first thing in the book is, the most important thing is the full-time score. And we forget that far too often, right? That the most important thing is winning the game. So how you get there, that's a journey. But the ultimate aim is to put more goals into somebody's net than anybody else's. And that's the basic fundamental that should always be in the back of your mind when you're analysing a football match, when you're watching a football match, when you're coaching and playing in a football match. So I don't get how it's a weakness to change from playing one way to another. You look at other teams that change all the time and are very successful with it. Even Guardiola himself has been very good at sort of deciding, actually, every now and again we have to mix it up, because that puts doubt in the opponent's mind.
He's the best at that because he's obsessed, because he will look at, he's always talking about making changes, and he doesn't want to be predictable. Sometimes it's actually got against him because he's changed too much in big games. He's overthought them and he's been done. You think of the Lyon game in the Champions League when he went to a completely different formation. You think of that Champions League final against Chelsea when he emptied the midfield for no apparent reason and ended up losing the game because he was so scrambled.
I thought it was a great decision.
Yeah, I bet you did. Because he was so scrambled about what had happened against Tuchel. So you do have to have those tweaks, but process is important as well, because I take the point completely. The result is king. I get that. But actually, process in the long run, in theory, is going to get you there. And if it doesn't get him there, then they're going to lose. But I think with Bournemouth, actually, they were outstanding. And I think actually what was really interesting, it's a bit niche this, but I watched Rayo Vallecano on Sunday. Now, they're coached by Iraola's former assistant. And Iraola was at Rayo and did very, very well. They are exactly the same as they were. Aggressive, high press, make it really tough for the opposition, whoever they are, whether they're big teams, smaller teams, whatever. I mean, Bournemouth should have won that game 3 times over. They got done by a cross that flew in. That is not a shot for me. That was a cross that flew into the far corner. And Kleiber hits the post at 2-1, and that would have wrapped up the game. You know, 7 or 8 times out of 10, they win that game. But they do have that process. He will change things here and there, but they do have that process. I've not got a problem with a process, right? But you've got to make it work, and he hasn't made it work consistently. So I get it. You need to have variation and change, but you have to just do plan A better sometimes, and I just don't think they've done it very well.
I think process is great, but dogma is ridiculous, because if you're wedded to a system that clearly isn't working, then you just got to make sure that you do something to win matches. You're absolutely right. It's a cross. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Maybe I'm being a little bit cynical here. The penalty, Son's very clever, wins that, although Arida Balaga is an idiot.
What is he
coming
doing?
out like at a stupid pace. I don't know what that was all about. And actually, there was an offside goal, which is offside because he's coming back from an offside position, but you know, clearly it's still a sort of, if you want to beat Spurs, this is how you score goals. You expose the high line. Pretty obvious. Just a quick word on Bournemouth being really disappointed. He speaks to the players afterwards. They were like gutted, absolutely gutted that they didn't win the game. I think that's because it leaves them 3 points behind Manchester City, having sort of had the opportunity to go within a point of Manchester City. And it's good news for Brighton. It's good news for City. It's good news for Chelsea. Spurs 11 points now off the European places. I think the game with RZ is the biggest of their season on Thursday, Crook. You're commentating on it for talkSPORT 2. I think it might be one of the biggest games of the week, actually, bearing in mind the other scoreline. I mean, Liverpool PSG is a bit tight, isn't it? So that's a big focus. But I think that Tottenham game is huge.
Massive. Ange Postecoglou, I've said it before, I think he put himself under pressure with the comment he made that he always wins trophies in his second season. It's all or nothing, isn't it, on Thursday night? If they don't win this game, then he won't be able to honour that pledge that he made to the Tottenham fans. I think they will turn it around. I mean, they were really poor over in Alkmaar, and actually probably could have been on the end of a bigger defeat. It's only 1-0 with home advantage, with one or two players coming back into the team. I think they'll get through. I still don't think they'll win the Europa League for the reasons you said, that lack of tactical flexibility. But yeah, huge night on talkSPORT too. James Maddison's got to start the games. I mean, this has been a quandary for me for a while. How can Tottenham be as poor as they are and James Maddison can't get in the starting 11? I don't understand that at all.
I think it's because they're worried about, Postecoglou is worried about the fact they play through midfield too easily. They get played through too easily in that midfield area. In a couple of games I've seen them, they've been cut to shreds. And when he's in that midfield, it lacks a little bit of bulk. I think that's because the other players haven't got as much mobility. They almost need an extra body in there. And if you have Kulusevski a little bit deeper, his mobility and sort of strength is better than Maddison's, but his creativity gives him so much going forward. Chelsea won, Leicester 0. They've taken 15 points from the last 12 games. They just about got 3 points here. Okay, we're going to come on to Maresca in just a second, but the first thing I want to sort of dive into, Kevin, is this answer that he keeps giving. So on Thursday night, I was in Copenhagen with Chelsea, and he sort of explained away the sort of lethargic pace of the game and the difficulties that Chelsea had breaking them down because Copenhagen went to a back three. Copenhagen never play like that. And it's like, it's outrageous. I'd planned for them to be like this, and then they adapted. That was out of order. How could we get past that? And then yesterday, his interview was, Leicester changed to a back four, and they've been playing back four all season. So, I made the plan. I gave the players the plan, and then I had to change it. So that's what happens, right?
Yes, all the time.
People look at your team and they think, well, how can we get the best? The role of a football coach isn't to develop a great plan against your perfect opponent, hand it over to the players and say, execute it, and not think about any of the variables that could happen during the 90 minutes. The fact is that being a football coach means this is how we're going to set up, knowing that different things happen in football matches and you have to react to it. Am I going crazy here, or was that the most stupid thing to say?
Do you know what the difference is, right? When you get a guy like Iraola or Arne Slot or some of the other, like Xabi Alonso, when they say something like that, what they'll do is they're saying it almost as a nerd. They'll go, oh, this was fun. They did this, and then we had to work out what to do. And It was great because we did. You listen to Slot talks about that kind of stuff all the time. Oh, I noticed they did this, so we did this, and blah, blah, blah. It's done with real energy and real kind of enthusiasm for the tactical side of the game. It's never, oh, it was really tough because they did this. Yeah. And that's what kind of Maresca seems to have slipped into, this kind of...
It's almost like it's an affront to him that they've changed they've disrupted my plan.
It's Leicester, and they're really poor. And that's not a dig at Leicester. It's understandable that there's a big gap between teams that come up and the rest of the Premier League, all that stuff. But it is Leicester. They've lost 12 out of 13 now. So there's no excuse for the kind of tepid performance that Chelsea put in. And they needed a goal from one of the most hilarious players in world football, Marc Cucurella, who I absolutely love. Because he's just a maniac. And he scores the goal and it lifts the whole place. But before that, it was really tepid.
It was awful.
And Leicester looked a threat. Leicester did look a threat. And, Cole Palmer, had the penalty brilliantly saved. I know people call it his first miss, but it was a great save. But he doesn't quite look at it. I know he was ill, so that's part of it. But he's a young player. You cannot hang the entire club on his shoulders. It has to be. It's the same with Nicholas Jackson being out. It can't be all about him. He spent £1 billion on the squad. It's got to have some depth, and it's got to have
no depth.
More than this. it's a really bizarre situation. And Tyreek George coming through is really exciting, all that stuff, great. And they're going to have some really good players coming in. Estevao is sensational.
Yeah, he's scoring a lot of goals in Brazil at the moment for Palmeiras.
Brilliant.
And he's scoring unbelievable goals.
Yeah.
Like, literally, we complain that no one ever shoots from 30 yards anymore, and there's never any baggers. He does.
Yeah, he plays with real personality. He's going to be terrific. They're going to love him. But it's all... It was interesting. I read an article about them talking to lots of different Chelsea fans who go on a regular basis, who have gone for years, some younger, some older, and almost universally, the feeling was football's pretty boring. It's possession based. It's pretty,
but don't worry, Rob Sanchez is there to make everything interesting.
How does he keep appearing?
For example, why not one every now and again when Leicester have one attack and they cross the ball into the box? Why not come out like Superman and just punch the ball straight at a Leicester player and then be completely vacant in your goal so that they have a free shot on an open goal? Okay, they didn't take it, but it spiced it up a little bit, didn't it? Why are they picking him, Crook?
They rate him highly, obviously more highly than you guys do. And the briefing that we got a couple of weeks ago from Chelsea is they're not looking for a goalkeeper this summer. They've got enough quality on their books already, and that was without actually mentioning Kepa Arrizabalaga, probably their best goalkeeper, is out on loan at Bournemouth, despite the fact that he didn't have a great afternoon at Spurs
That's
either.
a damning indictment, isn't it? If he's the best goalkeeper on the books.
But it's a problem, isn't it? Because he is a goalkeeper who gives the opposition opportunities, and that makes defenders nervous, and it makes it difficult to win games. I thought they were a bit fortunate, Chelsea, to win this one. I'm just looking at their upcoming run of fixtures. Obviously, Copenhagen, second leg at home on Thursday. The Conference League should win that, and they go to Arsenal.
That's a big one. I'll be there for that one. Don't you worry.
They've got Tottenham and Brentford in back-to-back London derbies. They've got to host Everton, who are in decent vein of form under David Moyes. They've got to go to Fulham, who've already beaten them at Stamford Bridge. Before the end of April, they're going to have to play a lot better than they did yesterday to win those games. I still don't think Chelsea finish in the top five.
Yeah, but you said they were going to win the title back in November.
I was trying to get a rise from you.
I told you at the beginning of the year, if they get into the top, four, which was then what we thought would be required for Champions League, that would be a good season. I've said for ages I don't think they're good enough to be a Champions League team yet, and I'll stand by that. Okay, here's the big question though, because if you're a Chelsea fan and you're watching that, and you mentioned that it's not that interesting and they're a bit bored with it, it's a little bit like what the Leicester fans were saying this time last year about Maresca ball. It's slow, it's ponderous. Now, the Chelsea fans are certainly starting to fall into that chapter of their Maresca era, I think. And it was interesting that when he was questioned about that, because I think he turned around and had a go at some fans behind the dugout yesterday who were being a bit jeery towards him. And he said, if you think football is just PlayStation, you win easy, no way. Every game is difficult. Is that a wise decision to almost call out fans and sort of chastise them for their view, Kev?
I think he's a bit rattled, to be honest. I think there's been inconsistency about the message at times. He can be a bit downbeat as well sometimes. And he feels to me like a man under pressure. And the problem is at Chelsea, you can talk about projects all you like, but coaches are under pressure all the time at Chelsea because that's just how the club has rolled for decades. And successfully so, by the way, by making those changes. But the problem is that he's being asked to kind of helm this project and develop this team. But he knows all the while that coaches traditionally, if they're not getting the results, don't last. So you're kind of in this limbo about, right, well, how long have I got? Am I actually setting this up for the next guy, or am I going to be given the time to see this through? So it's kind of Groundhog Day because Pochettino, similar, eventually got the push and it all kind of fell apart. And, he can say all he likes about we're developing this and we're not a title-winning team. Okay, fine, he was right. But if they don't make Champions League, that is an enormous setback because they can't be just bouncing around the Europa League or the Conference League this season and expect that to be good enough. So he is a man under pressure and he looks like it. He gives you that impression at the moment.
They've got Copenhagen second leg on Thursday night. I'm going to be there for that one. They might not win it. It's in the balance. There's too much. There shouldn't be, but there is jeopardy on that game because of the poor performance in Copenhagen, especially in the first half last Thursday night, and the poor marking right at the very end when they conceded a goal late on. Right, shall we get stuck into Saturday's action now, starting at the City Ground? Quick whistle-stop tour around the two, I suppose, I was going to say the top two, but they're not the top two, are they? Because Manchester City have dropped out the top four this weekend, thanks to their defeat by Nottingham Forest, who beat them by 1-0. I was at this game, Crook. It was a terrific occasion. It wasn't a brilliant match. It was very tactical and it was very well thought out. And, there was only sporadic great attacking play. But Nottingham Forest deserved to win it. And I always was quite convinced all the way through that they were going to get a chance. And when Hudson-Odoi cuts in on his right foot, curls the ball to the far corner and it smacks the post, I thought, that's the only chance they're going to get. That's it. It's over. But right at the end, he made another one. Terrific day for Nottingham Forest in the sunshine at the City Ground. And they've turned into a very good team.
Yeah, brilliant atmosphere at the City Ground as well. I think we should doff our cap to you on this one because you did call a Forest victory. I think you and Scott Minto both felt like the way City play would play into Forest's hands, and that's the way it transpired. Obviously not brilliant from Ederson. We're talking about goalkeeping mistakes a lot, it seems, on this podcast, but I think he would have wanted to have done better with the goal. And they've got a 5-point gap now on Brighton, who are 6th. They're in a brilliant position to bring Champions League football back to the City Ground. I think if they do that, I'll back up what Scott said on the preview podcast. Nuno Espirito Santo, for me, would be manager of the season. When you look at where they were last year, looking over their shoulders, points deductions, having broken the PSR rules, he has put together a very good team, and they are, for the big guns, probably the most difficult side to face in the Premier League right now.
1995, the last time they beat them in the league in the top flight, Kevin. It's been a long journey back to some sort of level of success for Nottingham Forest. Who, look, if you're new, if you're a younger watcher or listener of this podcast, you'll be sitting there thinking, "So, Nottingham Forest have been in League One and the Championship for the last 20 years. What do you mean they're sort of regulars in terms of trophies? Go back to the end of the 70s and the whole of the 80s. They were regular title challengers. They were title winners. They're European Cup winners. They used to win the League Cup or get into the final almost every season, it felt like at one stage, and probably would have had, if there wasn't the ban from Europe at the end of the 80s, they probably would have had more of an impact there as well. So the idea of them getting back into European football is massive for the club, massive for the city. And it does feel like there's a swell of emotion, a tide going in that direction now, that it won't just be Europa League either, it'll be Champions League.
Yeah, and I'm so pleased. I used to live a few doors down from the City Ground, actually, and I did, Collick Road, when I was a student. It is an enormous football club. It's a great sporting city, not just with the football, but with the cricket as well. You've got, Trent Bridge just down the way from the City Ground, next door, pretty much. It is a club that really does thrive on that emotion, and you're absolutely right. They've really carried that wave of emotion. They've really used that, I think. And look at some of their performances against the big guns. Liverpool, they drew at home. They won at Anfield. Arsenal, they just contain them and say, come on, can you play through us? No? All right, fine. We'll take that. And this was the same with City. If they got the point, okay, that would have been fine. But what they've got is the quality to turn 1 point into 3. And you've got Gibbs White spraying wonderful, 40-yard passes out to the wing. You've got Hudson-Odoi, who's always got a trick in him. I really like Ilanga. I know he doesn't always deliver, but I do like him very much. And they've got lots of, and Chris Wood's been absolutely sensational. But the defensive unit and the work that goes on in front of them, it is really quite something. And it's a real skill that to know that you'll go through massive periods of a game where you don't have the ball.
Yeah.
And to have the discipline to say, that's fine. We don't mind that. That's fine. You have the ball. You can make a chance here or there, but we know at some stage in the game, we'll get the chance to win it. And to do that is really difficult. And the improvement in Matt Sells, if you look at his numbers,
amazing.
Phenomenal. And that comes from having that defence in front of him and the kind of quality of shots that he's now facing. So he's risen to the challenge, but the defence in front of him and the midfield has made a massive difference.
That's really key, actually. The quality of the shots that he's facing are of a lesser nature, so that he is able to make more saves as a result of that. He's kept 12 clean sheets this season, but Murillo and Milenkovic have been terrific. Murillo, 13 million quid from Brazilian football. What a signing. Milenkovic, what a signing.
Leader.
Signed in the summer. Absolute brute of a man. And those two work so well together. The tactic of always bringing Morato on to sort of stiffen it up right towards the end, although they didn't do that till stoppage time this week because they didn't need to. But they're just so well choreographed as well. They all drop back into shape so quickly. They're super fit. They do their recovery. Runs really, really well. But you were right to mention, I think, that the goal came from a Morgan Gibbs-White absolute peach. He picks the ball up, swivels, and plays a 50-yard crossfield ball, which was pinpoint. I mean, it could have landed on the head of an ant. It was that accurate. It was so good. So congratulations to Nottingham Forest. Who'll be playing European football next year in the Champions League. So will Liverpool, but they had a little bit of difficulty with Southampton. Was that just sort of casualness and sort of complacency, Crook?
Maybe, but if I was a Liverpool fan, as Kev is, I'd be a little bit worried about the second leg of this game against PSG because they got battered, didn't they, in Paris? 27 shots, 10 on target. Alisson, by his own admission, had the game of his life. Otherwise, that result may have been very different. And I think they were fortunate on Saturday that they were playing probably the worst team the Premier League has ever seen, because a better team would have made the most of Liverpool's lacklusterness and they would have beaten them. And again, they're reliant on Mo Salah, 2 penalty goals for him. This is going to sound churlish, and this is not with my Manchester United hat on. They're 15 points clear at the top of the table. I still don't think this is a great Liverpool team. I think all the credit goes to Arne Slot for making them difficult to beat and finding a way to win matches.
But listen, they don't have to be a great Liverpool team to win the title. They can be a very good team. They're not going to be a great Liverpool team until they've won back-to-back European Cups. A great Liverpool team would be someone who's won 4 European Cups in a row, because that's what great Liverpool teams in the past have done so. This is about being a very, very good football team that are the best in the Premier League right now, and they are by a country mile. I mean, I don't understand why we need to define them as sort of like the second coming of the Manchester City team that ruled football over the course of the last few years. That's not how football works most of the time. Oh, yeah, we've had a dynasty for a little while. Previous to that, we had the Manchester United dynasty. But even look at Chelsea. Chelsea never dominated English football. They won a lot of trophies, but they never dominated English football. That's really difficult to do. Manchester City have done it. Manchester United have done it. Liverpool have done it in the 80s. That's about it.
They've lost 1 game in the Premier League. That's extraordinary, really.
What do you want from them, Crook? What do you want? Come on, tell us what you want.
What do I want from them? I want them to finish 15th. But...
Yeah, I know what you want. You want them to finish, rock bottom, which is fine. I would want the same for your lot. But
well, you're more likely to get your wish.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. What I liked about the Southampton game was how angry Arne Slot was, actually. He was clearly furious at half-time, and he gave 3 players the hook. And I really like that, because we've talked all season about his ability to change games. And he must have read the riot act at half-time, because it took 3 players off. The energy was better. And he does not allow that complacency. And they got absolutely pulverised in Paris. But they kept on working. And they kept on trying to keep their shape. They were awful on the ball, but they're up against the informed team in Europe right now. If you look at PSG's results, and I know people will say, well, it's Liga, but you just look at the way they've been playing. And they have a brilliant midfield, PSG. This tie is not remotely over, because I think PSG will score at Anfield. It's going to be could be a really tight affair, but Liverpool will, I think, be better in possession than they were in Paris. I think it will be a different game. It's a big test for some of Paris's youngsters, but they have been sensational in the last few months. Ousmane Dembele has 22 goals in his last 16 games.
Yes.
I mean, he's been unbelievable. Barcola's in great form. You've got Kvaratskhelia. Vitinha, I mean, Wolves fans will not believe this, but Vitinha is one of the best midfielders in Europe right now. So there are real threats there. And Liverpool, even when they're not at their best, they're very, very difficult to beat.
He might be the best midfielder in Europe right now, Kev, but he'll never score a goal like he scored at Chorley in the FA Cup for Wolverhampton Wanderers, will he, eh? He'll never get a better one than that.
Pinnacle.
He'll never get a better one than that. Right, okay, thank you very much, Kev Meister. Thank you. We'll see you. We will hear from you, I'm sure, over the course of the next few days, because you'll be doing lots of updates on our European fixtures this week with Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night live football this week on talkSPORT. And Crook Meister, what are you up to? You've got a couple. Oh, you've Cheltenham. Sorry, yeah, Cheltenham this week. Big Cheltenham week for talkSPORT with Alan Brazil doing breakfast, a superstar breakfast from Cheltenham, and Crookie being there as well. We'll be back on, I think we'll probably have to be back Friday morning this week because of the situation with the Europa League on Thursday night being so key. Crook, enjoy Tottenham versus RZ. It'll be a really, really good occasion. That I think whatever happens, it's going to be the back page story by the time we get to Friday, unless Manchester United go out. So we'll see. Looking forward to it. Should be a good week of European football. That's it from us. We'll be back on Friday morning.